All right. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm really glad you're here tonight. I've just come back from a few days away in St. Louis, spending time with my daughter, son in law, and three of my grandkids. And it's been a good time away, um, kind of out of all the things that I am normally involved in, but at the same time, um, it is good to be back into my routine. Let me ask you this starting off. This really doesn't have anything to do with what we're going to be talking about tonight, but how many of you have discovered that routine is extremely healthy for your recovery? Um, Routine for me, I like to think of myself as being spontaneous, but I have learned that routine plays an important role in my recovery, whether it's a routine as far as what time I get up in the morning, what time I go to bed at night, or the things that I do regularly during the day, my time with prayer and meditation, journaling. In fact, somebody was just talking to me today about how they had discovered that the importance of what did they use? They used a different word than routine, but that idea, they were speaking specifically about journaling. Yeah, consistency. That's it, Blast. You're the one that was talking to me about that today. Consistency, routine, self discipline, an important part of recovery. And when we can get that through our heads, when I got that through my head, that made a real difference in my recovery. So, tonight, whether you're joining live or whether you're catching the replay later, you'll have to excuse me. I've been a little congested. I got a cough drop in, but been struggling a little bit with some congestion. So, tonight we're going to be talking about toughness. Now, not toughness like two guys standing in the MMA octagon with their fists at each other's face, but the kind of toughness that we were taught growing up, and how that definition of toughness often collides with recovery. And as I'm talking tonight, I want to invite your comments in the chat, or as you're watching on a replay later, I'd be interested in your comments on what we're discussing tonight. So, in my family growing up, toughness meant a few very clear things. What I was taught growing up is that you don't take anything off of anybody. You don't let anybody push you around. Don't let anybody disrespect you. The second thing was you don't show emotion. How many of you, maybe it's just something with my generation, but how many of you have ever heard your parents say, probably your dad, if you cry, I'll give you something to cry about? Have you ever heard that? That was a part of our definition of toughness. And then the third part of my family's definition of toughness when I was growing up was you never admit weakness, you never admit failure. You stand your ground, you handle your business, and you keep moving. And for a long time, I thought that was strength. I thought that's what strength looked like. That very thing. Now, yeah, crying was considered weakness. Absolutely. Yeah. What about other definitions of toughness? What other kind of things did you hear in your family when you were growing up that was toughness? This is what toughness is. This is what it means to be tough. Now, I want to talk for a few minutes about the old definition of toughness. For a lot of us, that definition of toughness was not random. It came from real experiences. It came from hard homes. It came from unsafe environments, whether that was at home or the neighborhood, whether that was at school. It came from criticism. It came from instability. Or it came from the expectation that there is no room to be soft. If you're soft, you're a loser and you'll never succeed. Now, for a lot of us, that definition of toughness helped us survive when we were young. If we hadn't, at periods in our life, had a definition of toughness like that, we might not have made it through. Or we might have come through scarred a lot more emotionally than what we already are today. And that version of toughness, it taught us endurance, it taught us self-reliance, and it taught us how to push through pain. And I want to say something clearly here up front. There is nothing wrong with surviving. We need to survive. And sometimes we do things in order to survive. But here's the problem. Survival skills are not the same thing as recovery skills. They're two different things. What works in chaos doesn't always work in healing. And if you're like me, the tools and the things that I taught myself and that I learned from my family and my friends when I was a child, I attempted to carry with me and continue to use all through my life. And as an adult, it caused me a lot of problems. Some of that toughness, that same toughness that helped me to get through childhood, through trauma, through early adulthood, can actually block growth later on in our lives. Not because it was bad necessarily, but because it was incomplete. It wasn't the whole story. So let me ask a question. What areas of your life, in what areas of your life did that old definition of toughness serve you well? I know some of you grew up in environments, some of you grew up in locations where you had to be tough. You had to be tough or you wouldn't survive. And where, at what point in your life, did that old definition of toughness start costing you? When did it start causing you problems? I want you to think about that. Now, that old definition of toughness that many of us had, that we learned in our childhood, that we learned as a young adult, many times that old idea of toughness feeds into our addiction. When you're raised in an environment where emotions aren't safe, something that's very important happens. You don't stop having emotions. You might think you do. You might try to act like you do, I've shared before, I had a young lady when I was in my early 20s. We'd been dating and she thought we were going to get married. Man, I had no intention of marrying her. And when I broke up with her, I remember her screaming in my face, "You know what your problem is? You have all the emotion of a rock." And I burst out laughing right there, right then. I just burst out laughing. I lost it. Because in my mind, I was thinking, well, I must be doing it right then. Because emotions aren't safe. Emotions cause me pain. Emotion is a sign of weakness. But we don't ever stop having emotions. What we do is we stop expressing them. We stop exhibiting them. Anger goes underground. Fear goes underground. Shame, it goes underground. Sadness goes underground. They are all still there. We're all still experiencing them. We just refuse to show them outwardly. Do you hear what I'm saying? Can you identify with what I'm saying? And when feelings get very deep, they don't disappear. They look for relief. Now, for many of us, addiction or compulsive behavior wasn't an act of rebellion. It really wasn't even about pleasure. It was about relief. You may know my struggle, my biggest struggle was in the area of sex addiction. And I had a therapist tell me right after I was released from prison, 15 years or so ago. She told me I was a sex addict, and I got angry. I'm not a sex addict. And she said, you are a sex addict, but don't worry about it, because sex addiction has very little to do with sex. Our addictions have to do with an attempt to regulate ourselves, an attempt to control our feelings. We experience feelings. We don't know what to do with them. We're afraid of them. We think they're going to show weakness. We think that if we experience feelings, we're going to be hurt. We're going to look weak, but they don't go away. And so we look for a way to regulate those feelings. Now, a lot of you know my little formula to recovery is the idea that behind every behavior is a feeling, and behind every feeling is a need. But we focus on the behavior. And for many of us in our struggle with addiction, we are so focused on the behavior because the behavior is what's causing the immediate pain, whether that's physical problems, whether that's problems in our relationships, in our marriage, whether that's problems at work, legal problems. The behavior is what's causing the pain, but the behavior isn't the problem. The behavior is an attempt. It's an attempt to regulate and control the feelings, and the feelings reveal a need that's present in our lives. So the behavior isn't about rebellion. It's about regulation. The addiction isn't about pleasure. It's about relief. And secrecy wasn't about deception. Secrecy is an attempt at self-protection. Now, if you grow up believing that failure is dangerous and weakness is unacceptable, hiding becomes a survival strategy. That's what it is. And that is the core of our addiction and our struggle with compulsive behavior. Now, here's the truth. Secrets don't protect recovery. Connection does. You know, for most of my life, secrets, man, I lived in a world of secrets. When somebody asked me a question, my thought was never, what's the truth? What's the correct answer? My immediate thought to any question was, what are they looking for? What kind of answer are they looking for? What's going to pacify them, and what's going to keep me out of trouble? So this is where recovery starts asking something very different from us. So let's talk about redefining toughness in recovery. Recovery doesn't eliminate toughness. We have to be tough in recovery. We can't be weak in recovery. If we're weak in recovery, we're never going to experience freedom. So recovery doesn't eliminate toughness. Recovery defines it in a healthy way. And the first redefinition is this: toughness in recovery is honesty. It's honesty about cravings. It's honesty about fear. It's honesty about uncertainty. It's honesty about limits and limitations. For many of us, saying I'm struggling feels more threatening to us than the struggle itself. It's that fear of honesty. It's that idea that honesty is vulnerability. Honesty shows weakness. But here's a key thing for you to remember. Relapse is rarely sudden. A lot of times I'll talk to somebody after a relapse and I'll ask them, okay, what led up to it? What took you there? And they'll tell me nothing led up to it. I was doing great. I was doing fine. And boom, it just happened. Relapse never occurs like that. Relapse is always a process. Relapse is always a journey that sometimes starts hours or days or weeks ahead of time. It usually starts with thoughts in our heads like, I don't want to be a bother to anybody. I should be further along by now. Or I'll deal with this later. Have you ever struggled with those thoughts? Have you begun to struggle internally with cravings, with feelings, with emotions? And you know, the idea in AA and in 12-step groups and all recovery is when you're struggling, call somebody. AA talks about the 500-pound telephone. All of us have experienced that. And a lot of times that thought is, I don't want to bother anybody. If I call somebody, if I reach out, they don't want to talk to me. I don't want to bother anybody. Or we beat ourselves up with the idea, I should be further along by now. The problem with that statement, I should be further along by now, what's at the root of that statement is the idea that a day is going to arrive when I'm never going to struggle again. And I've got to tell you, if that's what you're shooting for, if that's what you're expecting in your recovery, you're destined for failure. I don't care. Maybe you had 30 days recovery and you acted out last week. You relapsed in some way. Some of us will beat ourselves up and say, man, I blew all that. Oh, we didn't blow anything. Not if we get up and examine what happened, adjust our plan, and move forward. Or the idea that I'll deal with this later. There's never a better time later. The time to deal with our struggles is right now in the present. Honesty, early and loud, is strength. Honesty equals strength. Can you identify with that? To me, even as I make that statement, honesty is a lot harder for me, a lot more difficult for me than just lying or just reaching for my drug or my addiction of choice. And here's a couple questions for you. I want you to think about these. Maybe jot them down, think about them later, or shoot an answer now in the chat. What makes honesty hard for you? Is it a fear of judgment? Is it a fear of disappointment, disappointing others? Or the fact that I'm a disappointment to myself? Is it a fear that we're going to be seen differently? We're going to be seen as somebody who's messed up, or we're going to be seen as somebody that continues to struggle. The old definition of toughness would tell us things like shake it off and move on. Yeah. Honesty is vulnerability, Blass. And vulnerability is not a bad thing, is it? Vulnerability allows us to experience recovery and healing. You know, if I fall and break my arm or break my leg, and I try to hide that from everybody, it'll never heal. Or if it does, it'll heal improperly, and I'll walk the rest of my life with a limp, or I'll struggle with my arm for the rest of my life. It's when I make myself vulnerable and I confess that I've got a problem, that I've been injured, that I'm hurt. Then I can get treatment. I can experience healing. But it takes vulnerability on my part first. That is exactly right, Blass. Our old definition of toughness says just get up and shake it off. I remember one time, man, when I was growing up, we lived on a hillside with a gravel driveway. And I remember I was running down this gravel driveway, and I don't remember why, but I tripped and I fell. And I went down on my hands and knees in the gravel. And man, I skinned my hands up. I ripped my jeans, bloodied my knees, and I started to cry. And I remember my dad looking at me from up on the porch and saying, "Get up, you sissy, that didn't hurt." It did hurt. It did hurt. And honesty and compassion would have been a lot more beneficial to me than that concept of toughness that says shake it off and move on. Recovery tells us slow down and stay with it. And this is one of the hardest shifts. When we struggle in our recovery, for those of us who are addicts, whatever that addiction may be, when we struggle, what most of us try to do is push it behind us. We want to white knuckle and press through. That idea, shake it off and move on. But what recovery, what real toughness asks for us is curiosity. Why am I struggling with this? What are the feelings that I'm experiencing? What's the need that's behind those feelings? The need creates the feeling, and it's an attempt to run and to hide from that feeling that leads us into our compulsive behavior. Slow down. Learn to exercise curiosity. What am I feeling and what am I running from? What's the need that's present here in my life? This is one of the hardest shifts that we will ever experience on our journey. Addiction and again, I'm sorry, but I'm struggling with congestion and a little bit of a cough. Addiction trained us to escape from discomfort immediately. Recovery trains us to stay present in the discomfort without acting out. This means that we have to learn to sit with anxiety. We have to learn to sit with anger, with sadness, with loneliness. And we have to question, why am I experiencing these things? What's taking place here? What's going on? What is it that I'm trying to run from? And we have to learn to sit in those things without numbing, without looking for a quick fix, without turning to run. Recovery isn't about feeling less, and that's what most of us have been chasing through our struggles with addiction and compulsive behavior. We've been chasing an escape from feelings, but recovery isn't about feeling less. Recovery is about tolerating more without self-destructing. That's emotional endurance. And that takes real strength. Not this fake strength, that this false sense of strength that we've lived with for the majority of our lives. A part of toughness in recovery is learning to ask for help. It's understanding that I don't have to be able to do everything by myself. The old story says, I should be able to handle this on my own. Let me ask you a question. How's that been going for you? How's that going for you? Recovery tells us the truth. Healing happens in connection. It happens in healthy community. It means things like calling somebody before the slip, not while we're dangling on the edge of the cliff and we've already started that fall. Calling somebody before the slip. Calling somebody sometimes even before we begin to struggle. Just getting used to reaching out and interacting with people. Connection looks like admitting when we're overwhelmed. There are times when I get overwhelmed. There are times when I need a safe place to be able to share that. I just don't know that I can handle anymore. I need to be able to be honest. And that takes connection and healthy community. White knuckling is not strength. White knuckling always is isolation in disguise. It's trying to convince ourselves that we can do this thing by myself. Recovery toughness is reaching out before you're desperate, not after you're desperate. It means that I begin to look for those triggers, those warning signs that I'm going to struggle. For many of us, we're here right now, we're here between Christmas and New Year's. I've talked with many of you about Christmas. I talked with somebody today that I've asked for weeks now. I've asked regularly, how are you going to do through Christmas? Do you have a plan? What are you going to do to get past those struggles that are coming? For a lot of us, Christmas is a real struggle. It brings up losses. It brings up consequences from old behavior. And it's okay for us in recovery to experience that and to be real about that. But I asked this guy repeatedly, have you put together a plan? What are you doing? And he told me, I'm fine. Christmas does not cause me problems. And I met with him today. And he told me, he said, man, I struggled big time. I struggled big time. There are times when we need to be honest and we need to make that trigger list. We need to let somebody walk this path with us. It's okay to do that. We reach out before we're desperate, not after. Now here's another question. I'm full of questions tonight. Who do you reach out to when things start getting heavy? And I'm going to challenge you. If there's not a name that immediately comes to mind, then you're not in a safe place. And you don't have community. Who do you reach out to when things start getting heavy? Now, another redefinition of toughness in recovery. This is exactly what you were telling me about earlier today, Blas. Another redefinition of toughness in recovery is consistency matters more than intensity. Recovery is not built on heroic moments. Recovery is built in ordinary moments that are consistent. Exactly what you were talking about earlier today, Blas. And this looks like things like daily check-ins. It looks like setting healthy boundaries. It looks like routine. Reaching out, man. It can be tough. Yeah. Some more things that need to be normal in our lives is structure. Regular meetings may be an important thing. Meetings are an important thing for me. I've shared before, I have a Monday night meeting I'm in every week. And the joke is, if Ron lives to be 100, somebody will be pushing him into the room in a wheelchair. And I'm telling you, that's truth. They will be. Not because I'm afraid that if I don't make the meeting that I'm going to relapse. But that room, that meeting has become a place of safety for me, a place where I have family. Consistency speaks to things like showing up on the days when we don't feel motivated. One of the things that I've learned in recovery, if I decide I don't want to do something today, like my daily reading, my daily meditation, my meeting this week, If I decide, if the thought passes my mind, I think I can get by without that today, then I'm deceiving myself. Yeah, blast. You're going to have to look. You're going to have to look at moving up here if you're going to be pushing my wheelchair. One simple tool that I use and teach daily is a check-in. I've done daily check-ins for years, but several years back when I found the group, the program, the weekly meeting that I attend regularly, they were using a check-in format that was very close to what I was using already. And man, I switched over to theirs. And in my daily check-in, I answer 4 questions. Today, what am I feeling? We're back to those feelings. Feelings are important in recovery. Remember, feelings are what we're trying to escape from with the behavior. What am I feeling? What am I thinking about today? What have I been doing? That includes who have I been around? Where have I been? And what am I thinking about doing? So I'm identifying what it is that I'm feeling, and then what am I thinking? What am I doing? What am I thinking of doing? These things help me to identify triggers and problem areas in my life so that I can put together a plan to be able to get through the day. This isn't a big dramatic check-in, and it's not something that takes a lot of time. But I'm going to tell you, for me in my life, this daily check-in, and I write it down. I got a notebook right here, and I write it down. And this daily check-in written down helps me to identify patterns. It helps me to identify potential struggles, and it helps me to build a plan to make it through. Consistency builds safety, and safety builds long-term change. Toughness includes the idea of self-compassion. This is so important. This part is hard for a lot of people. It's something that has historically been extremely difficult for me, and I can still find myself struggling today with this idea of self-compassion. It's hard for a lot of people. It can be hard for me. Self-compassion doesn't mean excusing behavior. We talked about this, last week or the week before? We talked about not excusing behavior. It doesn't mean that we're avoiding responsibility. What this means is that I'm refusing to let shame drive the process. I'm refusing to let shame drive the process. For most of my life, I believed that shame was the answer to changed behavior. If I shame other people, they'll change. They'll do what I want. If people shame me, it'll change my behavior. If I shame myself, I will change in order to escape that idea and that feeling of shame. And shame can produce change in the short term, for a few minutes, for a few hours, maybe for a few days. But shame that's produced, but change that's produced by shame never, ever lasts. Never. What's the verse that I go back to always that speaks so clearly to this? It's become my new favorite verse, my life verse, if you want to call it that. It's Romans 2:4. Do you not know that it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance? It's not shame. It's not judgment. It's when we recognize how much God loves us. That's what the message of Christmas, we've just come through Christmas. And that's exactly what the message of Christmas presents to us. God's kindness and his love. God didn't wait for us to get our act together. He didn't wait for us to get everything cleaned up and to make the world a perfect place. He came back into history, into time, in the physical, while the world was a messed up, brutal place. And he entered into our darkness with his love to provide the strength and the help that we need to experience change. Romans 2:4. Write that down. Look it up for yourself. Do you not know that it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance? Self-compassion is what keeps people. It's what keeps me in the fight instead of quitting. Self-compassion feeds my sense of hope. Again, that's the message of the Bible. It's a message of the gospel. Hope for a new life. Hope for a better future. I'm going to be wrapping up a little bit early tonight. But here's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with this. The toughest people that I know in recovery are not the ones who never struggle. What I have found is that the ones that never struggle are the best liars because they do struggle. They just fight to keep it hidden and to keep it secret. The toughest people that I know in recovery aren't the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who stay honest, who, when they struggle, speak up. And they talk about that in their group, in their community, to their friends. And they invite their friends and their community in to walk with them during that time. The toughest people I know in recovery are the ones who choose to stay connected. They stay connected. That means maybe going to meetings every week, not out of fear of relapse. There was a time when I went to meetings because I had to. My parole officer told me if I didn't, she'd violate me and I'd go back to prison. There was a time that I went to meetings because I was convinced that if I didn't go to meetings, I would relapse. But for years now, I go to meetings because that's where I found family. That's where I found community. That's where I experience safety. A place where I can be open and honest with no fear of shame, no fear of judgment. We stay connected. The toughest people in recovery are people who stay engaged, even when it's uncomfortable. In recovery, toughness doesn't harden you. It's not about never being shaken. It's not about never crying. It's not about never showing weakness. It's not about never admitting pain. It's about owning my struggles. It's about admitting when I'm overwhelmed and when I'm hurting. It's about being honest that I can't handle everything by myself. I can't do it all. Recovery doesn't harden you. Recovery opens you up to others. I'm not saying open to everybody. We have to be selective about who we share our story with. But I will say this, we have to have somebody. We have to have a place where we're able to be open. Recovery strengthens us without breaking us. It's that idea. I remember years ago, I went to Chicago. In fact, sixth grade. It was a sixth grade trip. I've been there a few times since then, but I remember my sixth grade trip to Chicago. At the time, the Hancock Tower, that's what it was called then. I think the name may have been changed. And at that time, it was the tallest building in the United States, maybe in the world, but I know in the United States. And I remember sixth grade trip going to the tower. We took the elevator up to the observation deck. And I remember a guide up there took a piece of string with a weight on it and tied it to a rail that was attached to the window and to the glass. And he did that to demonstrate that that tower, as tall as it is, I forget what it was, 100 stories or something. That tower, the wind blows, but that tower doesn't snap. But you know what? That tower moves. And we could watch that weight on that string attached to that rail. We could watch the sway in that tower. That tower was strong, and that tower stood and stands today because it was able to bend and not break. It was able to move, not because it stood solid. We don't have to stand solid. We have to have some flexibility. We have to have honesty. We have to be able to bend and move. Recovery strengthens us without breaking us. In order to not break, we have to be able to move, to be flexible. What I can tell you is you need to be tough. You have to be tough in recovery. But that definition of toughness is not the toughness that we learned when we were kids. That toughness maybe helped us to survive through our childhood, through our teenage years. But that idea of toughness today has to take on a new picture, a new presentation for us. All right, now, if this is connected with you today, and you need support in your recovery, if you'd like to talk, you don't have to do this alone. I can tell you, whatever you're struggling with, there are meetings available to you, whether it's in-person meetings in your community, whether it's online meetings. I attend meetings that take place over Zoom. Or if you'd like to talk, reach out. You can reach me here on Facebook. You can email me at rwcoaching2@gmail.com. You can visit my website, rw-coaching.com. Reach out. I'd be happy to talk with you. I'd be happy to help you find a meeting in your area. I'd be willing to do that. Reach out. We have to have community, and we all need help from time to time. And we need to be honest about that. Thank you for being here tonight. If you watch this on a replay, I'd invite you in the chat, whether it's here on Facebook or on my other social media. All of my other social media there are links at the bottom of my webpage. This video will be posted on YouTube at the latest by tomorrow morning. If you're watching on one of these other platforms, feel free to shoot comments in the comments section. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to know where you're from. I'd like to hear your answer to some of the questions that I've presented here today. Feel free to share. Feel free to follow. And I will be back next week. We will be next Tuesday. Will be our first live event in the new year. And I've taken a break for a couple of months here from having guests, but I'm already in the process of lining up guests. I try to have guests once a month, and guests will be back with me here shortly. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you about some of the guests that will be here with us. All right, guys, have a good night. Share the feed here on Facebook, on YouTube, follow, and I will see you guys next week.